Good evening. You are with the Urban Debate here with us. I'm Sahar Zaman. Tonight, in the first half hour of what we're going to be discussing, raising a question of what we have raised several times in the past as well. The archaic sedition law that the country has, that India has had, in fact, since 1870. This is section 124 of the IPC. Once again, we're asking, why shouldn't it be scrapped? When will it be scrapped? And which government will have the political will to scrap it? And there's a reason why we're asking this right now, tonight, again. That's because the latest government data is out on this. This is what the NCRB states, that cases of sedition have risen by a massive jump of 165% in the past 3 years. But parallel to that is an all-time low of the conviction rate. Barely 3% conviction in these cases that have been reported, which effectively indicates that these cases are weak, they have been used to intimidate, and they eventually do not hold up in the court of law. So why should we continuing have a sedition law in India, where citizens suffer, where citizens get marked and face the brunt for having faced that slapping of the sedition law against them, that they have against their name forever, even if not convicted? Let's throw this open to our guests. We have interesting names with us tonight, representing each aspect to this discussion of India doing away with the sedition law, and it's high time. We have with us Mr. Tuhin Sinha, who's the spokesperson of the BJP, Mr. Shailesh Gandhi, former Chief Information Commissioner, Dr. Shama Mohamed, National Spokesperson of the Congress, and Mr. Sanjay Hegde, Senior Advocate of the Supreme Court. We're also going to be taking case-per-case details here that have been listed in the NCRB, which states have shown maximum number of sedition cases, how people individually have been targeted just for protesting, just for reporting on cases. And that is the reason on why we're seeing a rise in sedition cases in the country. First to you, Mr. Sanjay Hegde, this is something that comes up several times. We have discussed this so many times in the past, and yet we don't see a government taking this up seriously. Does it, at the end of the day, eventually boil down to a government having a political will to do away, to scrap this law, which goes against the spirit of right to protest, right to free speech, or the spirit of a thriving democracy?
See, the sedition law came in England way back in the era of Queen Elizabeth I. We are talking of the 16th and 17th centuries. And then from there it came to India with British rule. India has always had this thing about people rebelling against the ruler. That is seen as almost like namak harami or haramkhori and things like that. So this was a concept which was rather easy for a colonial state to enforce. But post-independence, when we have a constitution that protects freedom of speech, freedom of conscience, it's rather archaic. This was the very section under which Mahatma Gandhi was convicted, against which even Tilak was convicted. Pandit Nehru, in the first days of the Union, said that the sooner we get rid of it, the better. But nevertheless, he was told that, look, we are a new country. We should have something to protect us against people who speak anything, and it remains on the statute book. And for 70 years of the Republic, it has gone on. You know that very rarely will there be a conviction. There has to be sanction from the government before a matter is prosecuted. Sanction also is often not given, and correctly so. But the threat of invoking a section which carries a life sentence is in itself a huge deterrent to freedom of speech. Now, the constitutionality of this section after the coming into force of the Constitution was challenged, and the Supreme Court gave a very nuanced judgment. The Supreme Court said that, look, not every speech is seditious. Sedition, a speech which actually leads to violence against the state almost immediately thereafter, that may possibly come within this definition. And then there is a later case of Balbir Singh,
Right.
where on the day of Indira Gandhi's assassination, two Sikhs shouted slogans in support of Khalistan and in support of the killers. Even that was not held to be sedition because no violence ensued. Nevertheless, it is very easy to brand people as anti-national.
Right.
You then get some thanedar or the other to register an FIR, and then the whole process itself is the major punishment. If you happen to get convicted by court, then you are doubly unlucky. But everybody knows that most of these cases do not end in conviction anyway. But it's a very useful weapon for the thanedar to threaten, and
Absolutely.
it has a great chilling effect on people's right of free speech. Thank you.
Absolutely, and Sanjay rightly pointed that because this has such a low conviction rate, it is the process of that case which ends up becoming the punishment. I mean, if your name is attached and constantly taken with respect to being slapped with sedition here, and that becomes the punishment. Mr. Shailesh Gandhi, this is a 165% jump. This is a huge spike that we are seeing in the past 3 years. And in a lot of cases that have been reported, it has mostly been citizens' protests against various issues. More recently, it has been a case of politicians visiting a victim's grieving family, or even reporters on ground doing their job. So we are looking at an increasing frequency also with respect to the circumstances under which the sedition law is slapped. It is continuously binding citizens' freedom on various levels, even if you really are just doing your job.
This is an absurd thing and needs to go. I mean, in one sentence, if I may put it. It's unfortunate. And this is part of the Congress legacy also. The Congress should have removed it. Nehru thought of it, maybe not at that time, but maybe 10 years, 20 years down the line, this should have been scrapped. Sedition is spreading disaffection against the government. And I believe every right-thinking person must oppose the government and disagree with the government whenever there is an opportunity to do that, whenever there are things that are happening, and to get improvement. Change in society comes through dissent and disagreements. And now, with great pain, I am saying this. It really is painful. In the last 4 or 5 years, the number of traitors and sedition seem to be growing by leaps and bounds. I had not seen so many traitors in India before that. I was not even aware that India could have so many traitors. This is a very disturbing sign. This needs to go. And unfortunately, I think every party in power seems to assume or believe that they have become kings and their lineage will continue forever. This doesn't happen. And the new government comes and follows the same thing. The BJP, when in opposition, would not have liked sedition, I'm sure. And it's logical not to like sedition. And the Congress would have said, no, we need it. Today, the roles are reversed. And the Congress says, we should have sedition. Why doesn't everyone think in terms of India? Think in terms of the nation. Think in terms of free speech. Think in terms of the Constitution of India. These values are not enhanced by having a sedition law and treating it like this. This is something to curb dissent. This is something to ensure that people cannot talk freely, cannot think freely. This needs to go and must go. Question is, does the current government have the wisdom to realize that someday their rule will also end? Whether it took 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, but it will end. And when it ends, then they will be on the other side and say we shouldn't have such laws. let people get together with some wisdom at Parliament, forget this law, scrap it. That's the only thing that should be done. But I don't know whether they'll have the wisdom.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Shama, would you like to say something on that? It is at the end of the day, lack of political will, irrespective of which party, which government is in power. This is always kept aside as a safety tool for any given government, for any political party in power, as a safety tool to use it against people as and when required to suit them, to suit the government.
This is not a safety tool, it's an extortion tool.
Okay, let me come to that. I think in our manifesto of 2019, it is said, can you hear me? Hello?
Yes, please.
Can you hear me? Yeah. So what I'm saying is in our manifesto of 2019, it said that we will repel the sedition sedition law when we come to power. It is clearly there in the manifesto. And I think Mr. Chidambaram has also said that sedition is a colonial era law and it has become redundant due to outdated laws. So there was, it was there in our manifesto. And like you said at the beginning, if you see the NCRB report, I mean, how it has increased from 2016 was 35, 2019 is 93, and that's a 165% jump. Now, who is using sedition as a weapon right now? Mr. Stan Swamy, a priest, has been arrested just a few days back. He's 83 years old. He has worked all his life for Adivasis, the downtrodden. He says his religion is people. Now, this is the person you put under sedition charges. So, let's not forget what happened in Bidar. There was a play done, an anti-CA play, sedition charges against the principal. I still remember the principal was arrested, taken away. She had a daughter who was by herself, alone, and she did not have a father. So, we have seen so many, and they have mixed up the UPA and sedition. Some people, like for the Delhi riots, if you look at it, 20 arrested, sedition charges, most of them below 31. So they've confused everything, this present dispensation government. Dissent for them is sedition. If you see the way UAPA has been put on anybody and everybody, after this government has come in power. And also UAPA in 2019, 1,226 cases. That is a 33% again jump from 2016. So this is not my report, the Congress Party's report, or any other's report. It is the NCRB report. And also, let's not forget, last year, they amended the UAPA. Now, an individual can be known as a terrorist by just looking at him. He does not have to be arrested, not convicted. He doesn't go through a trial, but he becomes a terrorist.
But Shama, it's also about the ease. It's also about the ease with which governments are slapping sedition. It's literally blindly. I mean, you have an Ashok Gehlot, the Chief Minister of Rajasthan, choosing to slap sedition against his own Deputy Chief Minister because he's written an open letter against him.
Yeah, but that time there was also with the Chief Minister. Both of them got the letter. It is not just him. You know that. It was sent to the Chief Minister as well as the Deputy Chief Minister. Now, it was both of them. It was some investigation happening. They wanted, so it was not just to the Deputy Chief Minister. It was also to Mr. Ashok Gehlot. So what are you talking about? So please, let's not get into those sort of things. I believe that, sedition should eventually... Sedition should...
Sedition was convicted by a Congress
would you like to respond to that? I mean,
sedition should go, but look at the number of cases.
It's not a question of pitching one against the other, but it's literally each government and each political party being guilty of loosely using the sedition law. Tuhin Sinha, please respond.
The increase in the number of sedition cases cannot be taken in isolation of the kind of conspiratorial activities which were being planned at a certain point of time. So if in 2016 there was a different scenario, and if in 2019 you had the Delhi riots, and if the Delhi riots had a build-up of over 2 months, if there were other factors which the investigative agencies realized later that the Delhi riots also had a connection with the Ram Janmabhoomi ruling and the Kashmir application of Article 370, then there was a larger conspiracy.
No, but Delhi is not even in the top 10 list of people facing sedition charges. the states are maximum Karnataka, then Assam, then Jammu and Kashmir, then Uttar Pradesh.
No, so in which case, yes, so there was there were the Bangalore riots in August on August 11th, and I can tell you for a fact that had it not been circumvented, had it not been contained that very night, there was a larger design and element to it. Now, point is, I can tell you with a very safe conscience that we don't use it as a tool for political vendetta. Unlike the Congress, which used it in 1975 against.
Can I come in? Can I come in?
Leaders, unlike the Rajasthan CM who uses it.
But Tuhin, this is not just about political vendetta or attacking your political opponent. This is about slapping sedition charges on ordinary citizens, on citizens who use their right to protest, on citizens who use their right to free speech in expressing their mind on social media posts. These are the maximum cases of the increase that we are seeing. We're not seeing political opponents being attacked and slapped with sedition. These are everyday people in what the statistics have.
If you read section 124 of IPC, it is very specific and the government follows that. We believe that any country which is serious about national security needs to be serious about the sedition law. The fact that the conviction rate is low by itself shows that the government does not follow a vindictive approach. The judiciary is fair. But fact is that if you are caught making incendiary remarks, incendiary statements which are against the state, then yes, that law should be exercised and that should exist.
I have a quick.
Can I come in on this? Can I come in on this?
Can I come
I want to rebut on that.
Right.
Can I?
Just 1 minute. Just 1 minute. Can I?
Shama, give us a few seconds here. I just want to bring in Mr. Sanjay Hegde on this, please. This is very important because Tuhin has talked about the conviction rate. Sanjay, you said the very fact that these cases continue having a low conviction rate is what does this clearly indicate? That these are being used to control, these are being used to intimidate. Is it fair to bring out that inference?
It's absolutely fair. The first thing I want to tell
Sanjay.
The first thing I want to tell Tuhin is that there is something called the Sharansky test. Nathan Sharansky, the Russian dissident, said that if in a town square you cannot say that the leader of your country is wrong, then you do not live in a free country. Today, if you invoke sedition against the school principal of where a play happens and there is no violence whatsoever, if you indiscriminately use sedition against your citizens, of course the prosecutions will collapse. But the very fact that the prosecutions collapse after many years means that you have dragged innocent men, women, and children through a court process that will brutalize them for life. And what is it that the state seeks to achieve? The state does not seek to shut up just the person who's accused. The state seeks to scare everybody else around, saying, don't you dare open your mouth, I will use sedition against you. That is not only anti-national, it is anti-rational.
Can I respond?
Can I respond to him, please?
Shailesh Gandhi, this is about every government. This is about every.
Sahar, I need to respond to Tuhin.
This is about every government that. Shama, hang on. We need to go to each and every one for a response as well here on this. Mr. Shailesh Gandhi, this is, as we said, about every government having that political will. If after so many years of independence, there is one party says that we put this on our manifesto, just in the previous elections in 2019, that doesn't resolve anything. I mean, we're still headed on snail pace to get that done.
Zaman, that's a joke. The Congress was ruling in India for many years, and 19 elections, they almost knew they are not going to win. So therefore, make a promise. Why did they? Is there any answer as to why it wasn't done in 2010? Why wasn't it done in 2005? There's no answer. The truth is, this is hypocritical. And unless answers are given honestly, we will not find solutions. The truth is, this is a terror tool used to suppress dissent. The Congress also probably used it. BJP uses it in greater numbers. That's the only real difference, I think. There is no difference between the two parties. And I wish, and that's why I said I plead for India. I plead for free speech. I plead for my constitution. Let the Congress representative even today say that it was a folly not to have rescinded this law, not to have taken this law back in 2010 or 2005. Then it will make some sense. People are not willing to admit to their mistakes. The ones they are, even in RTI, I have seen right to information.
Okay.
Whoever is in power dislikes RTI. Whoever is in the opposition loves it. And I've seen the play between BJP and Congress on right to information also.
Go ahead.
They are being dishonest.
Shama.
They're not thinking of the nation.
Absolutely.
Patriotism is not merely
Shama, go
winning
ahead.
elections.
You wanted to respond.
Patriotism is...
Yeah. Mr. Gandhi can go on talking about the Congress. It looks like he's really against the Congress party. Must tell you that we haven't used the sedition as much as it's being used right now. Let me finish, Mr. Gandhi. You've been talking for some time. Now, Tuhin has said something very important. He said about the Delhi riots. Now, sedition is basically used when somebody says something which can incite violence. Now, he's very good. Why is then Parvesh Verma not booked? Why is then Kapil Mishra not booked? Why is then Anubhav Sinha not booked? These are the people who should have been booked. They should have been booked. And why haven't you booked these people? Is very important, because they have said that they have said Goli Maro Salo Ko. And also Amit Shah, what did he say? That if I press a button here, it will, it will be there in Shaheen Bagh. It will electrify there. So these are things. These are the ones which has caused violence there, and that is the issue. I mean, let's not say about the Congress party and Delhi riots. You have gone and put sedition charges against anybody who protested against the CAA. So it is the right to protest. What is wrong in protesting? But who has caused violence there? Why don't you, if you're putting sedition charges on them, put it on the others also? It's only on one side which you have put the sedition charges. No, that's very important. And how they have amended the UAPA. Why are we not talking about that, sir? It's very important how they've amended. Now, an individual can be just called a terrorist. You will no conviction put behind bars. And let's look at Sudha Bharadwaj, let's look at Varva Rao, let's look at the whole lot. And they also say that if you read a terrorist manuscript, they call him also a terrorist. Now, we want to know what is this manuscript, which is a terrorist manuscript. That person also is a terrorist. Anybody. So just imagine when he comes out, or if he ever can, he's already a terrorist. Who's going to give him a job? He loses credibility. His children, school, they are known as a terrorist child. I mean, on what basis? There is no evidence. He's not convicted. But before that, Mr. Amit Shah says anyone who's walking there who looks like a terrorist can be called a terrorist.
I don't know why Shama is so hassled about an individual being branded a terrorist.
Would you want to respond? This is Tuhin, but this is also specifically Tuhin. This is also specifically not individually targeting anyone. But Tuhin, if you can hear my question here on this, please. This is on targeting individuals who have been protesting peacefully, where there has been no violence, on targeting journalists who have been reporting peacefully, there has been no violence seen, on targeting other citizens who are putting out social media posts as their own individual opinion, there has been no violence caused by that.
I don't know how you define innocence in that case, because one of the guys who got arrested initially, Sharjeel Imam, was the one who was talking of breaking Northeast from India. The other guy in Maharashtra, just 5 days before Donald Trump's visit to India, was talking about inciting violence while Donald Trump is in India. So I can give you, several examples of people who have actually incited violence and who were part of the conspiracy through the words they have uttered in the weeks preceding the Delhi riots, and which the investigation was later found had a direct connection to the riots. Now, Shama has been repeatedly asking, why should an individual be branded as a terrorist as per UPA? Let me tell you that we drew a leaf out of what happened in Sri Lanka in April 2019, when the perpetrator of the biggest terror attack, which killed 250 people, did not have any linkage to any known terror outfit. So unlike the Congress, which between 2006 and 2008 was a mute spectator to some of the biggest terror attacks, we work in advance. We take preemptive measure. Precisely why we were able to circumvent the Bangalore riots also.
So what you're saying, Tuhin,
Okay.
is how do you know the
All
individual
right.
is a
Okay.
terrorist
Yes, Shama,
when he's
Shama, you
not
could
there?
come in on this, please.
I want to ask Tuhin, I have no issues if you call him a terrorist after conviction or if you catch him at the site of the terror activity. But a person having a manuscript is also a terrorist. You call him a terrorist. What if the
Shama,
evidence shows that he is not a terrorist? That is our issue. That is what I'm talking about.
In history, the
All
terror
right.
laws,
How can
whether
you brand somebody a terrorist?
Sanjay, if you could come in at this point here, this is we're also talking about the UAPA because this is what the NCRB data releases. It talks about sedition laws. It talks about increase in UAPA cases here as well. But once again, I am continuously bringing this down to political will because this is for the government of the day to be looking at citizens' rights through the prism of what the sedition law does to you on ground. It is about a well-meaning government wanting to immediately do away with it because not everyone who's slapped with the sedition law gets convicted, as we said. Not everyone has been involved in a riot. It has been a question of very, very peaceful protests where, I mean, we're talking about political will. Let me give you an example of what happened in Jharkhand, where 3,000 anti-CAA protesters by the state police was slapped with the sedition law. And the chief minister stepped in and said that these have been peaceful protesters. They have a right to protest. This needs to be revoked in this case against them. That is what political will is about. When you know that the police is arm twisting people, for the government to step in and say that this is wrong.
Yes, but here there is a problem, you see. The police will always arm twist people in favor of the government in power. So which government is going to say, no, Mr. Policeman, that is wrong. We have the power, we are going to do it. Now, I just want to explain, take one of Tuhin's examples and explain. Now, if somebody says, Goli maro salo ko, and he says it in favor of the state, then that may not be sedition. But if there was somebody who said that, look, we have to overthrow the Indian state, and as a consequence, violence occurred. You remember that immediately after the Operation Blue Star, there were Sikh soldiers who mutinied. Anybody who led that alone comes within the mischief of sedition as defined by the Supreme Court. But no, you may need the section for the rarest of rare cases, but this section has been abused left, right, and center. Anybody whom you dislike, you say, oh, this is a violent speech, this is anti-Indian speech, or we will press sedition. No matter, nothing happens. Arundhati Roy says says a lot of provocative things. She is a writer. She is entitled to say to live in a universe of words. Nobody gets into a fight on the streets and getting out to overthrow the Indian state after listening to Arundhati Roy. We all start thinking. Yet you start taking sedition against Arundhati Roy, against Varavara Rao, Sudha Bhardwaj, everyone. The more you abuse it, the more will be the need to overthrow this section altogether. And for Tuhin Sinha, I have one more thing. This actually was one of the things which was Nehru ki galti. I also agree that Pandit Nehru made a speech saying that this is the prince of repressive laws. The sooner that we get rid of it, the better. But he did not do it. At least one of Nehru's galtis, please solve it.
Okay. All right, and he had 4 terms of being in government to be doing that, had not been done, and then it was never done in the following years either. Mr. Shailesh Gandhi, of what we've seen in the recent past here, and also when we're discussing and also having scrutinized on a person's fundamental right, on a person's right to freedom, what all entails that, how do you think all of that fits in with the sedition law that continues to run parallel and very actively? It's an archaic law, and you would think it wouldn't be used. It's so archaic. Well, there has been no central government will to revoke this, but it's still there, it's sitting there, it's dormant, but it's not. It seems to be one of the most active parts of anyone's lives, watching television on how people are being slapped with this law.
As I mentioned, I think the political parties don't have the will, as you rightly pointed out. And what is painful is let them recognize they are not thinking of India. They are not thinking of the constitution. They are not thinking of what is good for the nation. They are thinking of what is good for them. Perhaps during this discussion, the hope I got was if a government in power feels it's going to lose the next election, maybe then it will bring in a move to scrap the sedition law. So long as the law exists, it will be misused. There's no two ways about it. I mean, for anyone to say, no, it's not misused, can anybody say that in the last 50 years it has not been misused in any spell of 10 years? I'm sure that nobody will be able to point that out. Therefore, my plea is the sedition law must be scrapped. Just as the Criminal Contempt of Court Act needs to be scrapped, this also needs to be scrapped. It is not a question of justifying A, B, C. If there is an incitement to violence, that can be dealt with other IPC provisions. You don't need to have an anti-sedition law to do that. Branding a person anti-nation is wrong, bad, immoral. And I would again plead with my friends in BJP. Stop calling people anti-nationals. Stop talking about traitors. Indians are not traitors. They may be a rare person. There are enough laws and India has taken care of them. Stop talking this language of saying those who don't agree with me are traitors, are anti-nationals. That's not good for the nation.
Can I come this here to the BJP? Let's ask Shama. I'm coming to you in just a bit here, but Tuhin, specifically here for you. Does your party, does the government feel that there is a need to do away with this? Because we have had cases in the past as well here. Right now, we're looking at the maximum figures of sedition cases that come in largely from BJP-ruled states. If we look at the top 5, top 4.
Let me take this discussion a little.
Do you think there is a need to start the debate at least?
Let me take this discussion a little beyond. You know, we have very clear and very definite views on nationalism, on the way we see the national security. Now, today, Farooq Abdullah, a CM of many terms and a sitting member of Parliament as of today, has started pandering to China and using sentences like, if unless China intervenes, Article 370 cannot be. Now, I want to ask the distinguished members on the panel over here, do you condone his behavior? Should an elected representative, is that not seditious behavior? So as far as we are concerned, we have always been of the very clear view that any country which is serious about its national security needs a strong sedition law. Unlike the Congress, which speaks a different language when it is in the opposition. Now, the Congress itself had been in power for 50 years, even after Nehru was gone. If the Congress really felt that it was so easy, or it would have been responsible on its part to do away with the sedition laws, they would have done it away. Why do they start speaking about it when they are in the opposition? Because they realized when they were in power, they realized that or maybe because of some stakeholders in Congress which continue to hold views similar to us, they realized that it is not viable or feasible to do away with.
So are you justifying, Tuhin, then are you justifying this spike? No, but are you justifying this spike, this 165% spike in sedition cases in just the past 3 years?
The spike.
Are you then justifying this?
The spike needs to be seen, cannot be seen in isolation. You had the Delhi riots this year. You had the Bangalore riots, which were preempted. So many of these incidents, the spike needs to be seen in relation to the prevailing situation and circumstances at that point of time. Now, I can tell you for a fact that a lot of these elements, we call it the Islamist Naxal nexus, were hoping that the BJP would not come back to power in 2019. The fact that BJP came back to power with a stronger majority has made them come out of their hibernation. And yes, there has been an increase in seditious activities or conspiratorial activities to harm the country.
Can I come in?
The BJP is not the country.
But the spike that comes in is maximum. Is maximum. All right, Shama, you can respond to this here. We are constantly looking at or getting to hear examples of the Delhi riots or the Karnataka riots as if these are the only 2 cases that have caused this spike. effectively, if you look at the breakdown of what has come in the past 3 years, and this is up to 2019 or what the figures show, these are not 2020 figures, by the way. And Delhi and Bengaluru riots are this year. We're not even talking about 2020 figures, Tuhin Sinha here. This is a spike of 2017, 2018 and 2019 grand total is what we're looking at. How do you justify that spike? Shama, please go ahead.
So he spoke about Nehru all the time. At least Nehru had the guts to say that, at that point of time that it had to go. And of course, over the time, there were various issues. We were a new country, various things were there. But at least we are saying that, and we said it in our last manifesto also. Now, if you look at that, he keeps talking about the Delhi riots and he talks about Bangalore. He clearly said, these Islamic organizations. I want to ask him why you have the power under UAPA. Why haven't you banned the PFI? Let me ask you that. You could have done it. You haven't done it. You have amended the UAPA. Why didn't you ban? You keep talking about it. Then recently a journalist going for the Hathras to report on that, arrest him and just put a UAPA on him. Why? Because he's Muslim. So, so that is what you do. I mean, if you're talking about Delhi riots, then you should also take action against the other part, not just only on one section on the anti-CA protesters. That is the question we are asking. If you're putting charges of UAPA, you should do it on both sides. Why is it only of the anti-CA protesters? That is the question you need to answer to him, which you do not have an answer. Why haven't you arrested Kapil Mishra? Can you give me an answer? Who's threatening on television? On television, who says that if these people don't move from here, then we will take law into our own hands. So you need to arrest. Wait, let me finish. You need to arrest these people. And you always say that the Congress party, one last thing. Mr. Modi, when he came on 2014, he said, we are the party with the difference. What is your difference you need to show? And let's not forget the Gujarat Assembly elections. Mr. Modi accused former Prime Minister Manmohan Singh, former Army General Deepak Kapoor, and former Vice President of sedition charges in a speech. Let's not forget all this. It comes from the Prime Minister itself. Did he apologize in Parliament to Mr. Manmohan Singh? No, he has not apologized. He doesn't know how to apologize. How dare he accuse them of sedition charges? You're accusing, and then you say you're nationalist when you accuse a former army general of sedition.
Okay, all right. Tuhin, if you could quickly respond to that. These are very specific examples that Shama is given, and the allegation here is the selective use of the sedition law. If people have been seen in public,
I'll answer her specific
giving violent speeches or using violent words, there is no action against them.
First of all, I'll answer all her queries. First of all, I use the word Islamist Naxal nexus, and there is a huge difference, mind you, which Shama is aware of, between an Islamic organization and an Islamist organization. So don't distort what I said. Number two, you keep asking about Kapil Sharma.
No, we're not going to go into that definition here. No. I am very specifically asking on the points being raised here. No, we will not go into the theology of what definition means what for terrorism and what for civil society. Very simply, if people in the public space and the public domain across television sets have been seen giving violent speeches, why wasn't sedition slapped against them?
Let me answer that. Now, her specific charge about why action was not taken against Kapil Mishra. I'll request you, if you can play the footage right away, that will be great. Now, Kapil Mishra is standing in front of a police officer. He says that ये पूरा जो East Delhi जाने का रास्ता है, इन्होंने ब्लॉक कर दिया. हमने बहुत कोशिश की. हम अभी भी इनसे रिक्वेस्ट कर रहे हैं कि अगले 2 दिन में आप खाली कराएं, और अगर नहीं खाली कराएंगे तो हमें खाली कराना पड़ेगा. Now, I am asking you, if 50 people gather outside your house and block your way outside, won't you say that? Has he said that we beat them up?
What gives him the right?
No.
What gives him the right? What about Goli Maro Salon ko? What about Kapil Mishra's Goli Maro Salon ko?
Okay.
What is the answer for that?
I'm going to get in Sanjay Hegde here on this. Sanjay, because this is such a broad definition, whether you're saying something specifically against the state or whether you're actually using violent words in your language, one selectively chooses what fits into that definition of showing disaffection towards the government, which is what the sedition law says. Now, disaffection, that could mean anything here. I mean, even if you're using violent language, that can be seen as affection then.
Absolutely. And that is why the Supreme Court was very careful in the early days of the Constitution to cut down the section, saying that if you read the section only confining it two cases where there is disaffection against the state, not necessarily against the government. If you say, let us overthrow India, let us fight to break India, and there is violence which accompanies that, only then, it is for those cases alone. So that is why I gave you the example of mutinying soldiers immediately after Blue Star. That may be one of those rarest of rare that the Supreme Court said. For those cases, it would be constitutional. But to use it in routine fashion, just because the chief minister of a state doesn't like my face or my religion, that is anti-national and anti-rational.
No, Sahar, you should ask him about Goli Maro Salo.
Okay.
Kapil Mishra said Goli Maro Salo.
We'll have to.
Why wasn't action taken against him?
I'm afraid we'll have to leave it at that. Shama, Tulin, both of you have raised your points and have been given enough space. Mr. Shailesh Gandhi, appreciate you being with us here as well. But I'll leave what Sanjay has left as a final point here. And more importantly, it is also for a lot of us here to be speaking that this is an archaic law. It's been 150 years or more that we're looking at. Several people have suffered through this sedition law. Remember, in this past half hour, we also said how you get marked. Your name gets attached to it, even if there's not a conviction at the end of the tunnel. You get marked for a very, very strong law. You get accused for acting against the state, even if there is no conviction here. It is time to do away. Remember, this is a thriving democracy. India is a thriving democracy where we every day talk about our right to free speech. We talk about our right to protest. We talk about this in great pride. And yet you have a sedition law, an archaic law which is not dormant, which is still very much in the active space, which is still being used against us, against peaceful protesters, peaceful people putting out their social media posts as well actively. We need to decide whether it is high time to do away with this. And we need to push our governments, our political parties to keep this as a prime issue as well. Appreciate all our panelists, all our learned panelists for being with us here tonight on further discussing something that has been raised several times in the past but continues to be pertinent, particularly at the glaring figures that we are staring at of the latest NCRB data that has come to us today.